Katrina, close your ears. We're not willing to be, workhorses all the time, although they certainly work very, very hard all summer. And I'm sorry that two of them can't join us tonight because I had hoped to tell them how much I and the river, and I'm sure the committee appreciates how much they did. The Not Me project, we won't be presenting tonight because of interview, that's their focus. The lovely thing is that Carol Frost, who first brought this method to the committee's attention, is looking at the data and teaching me about data and how many years it takes to be able to learn something significant, interpret. She was very excited by what we saw happening with this method, but she was really curious to see what, after the winter, the plant was able to store, because this particular method is about starving the plant through the season. So tune in next year for the return of the Not We No No.
Oh, no, can I add a little?
Oh, yes, you can.
Okay. This is coming from the the scientist perspective.
Yeah.
And part of it is, you do field research and people just think you go out and do it. I think through their experience, I think what they saw is, we just measure the regrowth. And that sounds easy, doesn't it? And as if it's a tube and it grows out the top and you cut it and it sprouts out the top and keeps growing. But when sometimes it grows a little out here, or it sticks two out the top, or it doesn't come out the top at all, it comes out the bottom, or a little bit out the top and the bottom. And it's like, but I don't know how to measure that. And these are very real science things. You still are just working out how you're going to do this and how you're going to measure this. And I think that's probably one of the bigger takeaways is that, wow, this is not easy. And I really have to think it through and keep it simple. Even what is the boundary, is a real challenge when you're out in nature. So
How large a plot at a time do you manage?
We had 6 plots.
Okay.
Two of them were cut with the Carol Frost method, once every 2 weeks. 2 plots were cut once a month with that method, and the other 2 plots were cut right to the ground.
Explain the first method.
So I will have the intern present that, but it is a matter of maintaining 2 leaves and removing all the other growth on the plant. And the first time that you do it, you do cut, leaving an open straw so that water collects and it gets fettered.
this is a tubular kind of plant, a little less bamboo, right?
One of the main things that the committee has been doing in the last couple of years is starting at the headwater streams and having us do a visual survey. John Burns joins us so that we also can take in plants that we don't want to harm, or if there's rare and endangered plants, or to be able to train interns on what to look for at different times of the year, and gathering where invasives have spread and where they're located along these upper watershed stretches, and then proposing to the towns and to the landowners where the infestations are, or to do some kind of removal, mitigation, trying to figure out what the best thing to do on that particular land. So it takes a while. We have done a pretty comprehensive job on Center Pond Brook in Beckett, and we're working on Savory Brook in Washington, and that brook is the one where we had the majority of the knotweed patches. We also removed a tremendous amount of barberry and some multiflora. We had a large project and an ongoing project in Beckett adjacent to the Center Pond Brook that was a very large multiflora removal. Look for a little film that will be coming out over the winter about how that project came about, and working with people that have machinery in the towns to also train them what they're looking for. So if they're at a house site or they're doing other work, they can start to recognize some of the invasives and maybe take them out while that machine's there. Right, Katrina?
So my name's Katrina. My project was mapping the invasives that we found along a stretch of Windsor Jams Brook. We also used the GPS just to mark data points. That's what I used mostly to make maps, the maps. So most of the invasives that we found quite a few. But the biggest one we found on Windsor Jams Brook was buckthorn, glossy buckthorn. And you can see in the far picture over there, that's Brian looking up at a few trees of buckthorn. This shows the entire length of the stream. And the points are different invasives. And the stars, the different colored stars, symbolize different features that we found that weren't invasives. These kind of separate them out a little bit so you can see what you have. And it also has like the plot numbers so you can identify what property they're on. So you can go back and talk to the landowners and get permission to remove some of their invasives. And this is the old beaver pond that had filled in. And you can see that's all like native sedges, and I think these are cattails out back, and that's one of the glossy buckthorns. But it's a really nice mossy areas that are they're underground water seeps. So the water will come out from under the ground and actually feed into these streams. For letting me be an intern. This is a Plantura Sarah, which is an iris that we found in the meadow, the beaver pond meadow.
Grabs start actually doing some more practice.
Bravo.
Where did you go on your class trip?
We went to Peru State Forest for one of my labs for wildlife. And we actually went by one of the places that Meredith set up for me to stay for the summer. And I drove right past it. I know exactly where we are.
Are there any patterns or relationships you saw between, the plants that you were studying or trying to capture data on and the kind of human features in the landscape? Is there anything you noticed about that?
I think we did notice an increase in invasives that we found where there was human disturbance. Old beaver pond that was grown in. There wasn't much on that stream because it was like the top of the watershed. Mostly when it crossed the road near culverts, when that ground was disturbed, there was a lot of invasives because we went through some logging areas.
We had nothing, and then we come to a logging area, and then it was like, oh,
Yeah.
people.
Have them with them, have them without.
I can't say enough. Forests, and we would come across something like this and talk about the differences, because one of the things I noticed on this trip was differences in land management. And so you come here and you look to the left and there are these huge trees and they're 40 feet apart, and you look to the right and there's not much more than, that's greater than 8 inches in diameter. So we really tried to pack the day. You may go on. That's the size of a quarter. So that's really kind of cute. And I was saying to them how the name of the animal that made it is the least interesting thing. Is it running after something? Is it running away from something? Is it healthy? So we're kicking here now into looking at some of the options to some of the invasive shrub species. This is Viburnum nudum. There's the flowers for it. Fruits, these viburnums and the dogwoods often have these purple berries that ripen at different times of the fall and kind of over a 6-week period. Great choice. Viburnum nudum variety casinoides. This is wild raisin or long currant. Makes a nice shrub, typically not much more than 6 or 7 feet tall. But berries are good for you and good for the birds. This guy I love. We have 2 species like this. And this is called pinkster. I think they're both called pinkster because most people don't know the difference. The difference is, one, you walk up to it and from 6 feet away you can smell it. It's incredible. The other, from 60 feet away you go, there's pinkster out there. That's the one I like. And so it's our native rhododendron or azalea, the genus for azalea or rhododendron. And these are more in the higher altitudes, but look at it, it's a fabulous, and a beautiful plant, and it just smells heavenly. So nice thing to have around the yard. We also have viscosum and the swamp one, and that's a white one. Again, it smells wonderfully. These guys are fun. These guys are they're nuts. Hazelnuts, witch hazel, which is really neat, partially because the nuts stay on the tree for 2 years. They can take a couple of years to mature. But a beautiful, low, small tree that you can grow. And the neat thing about those is that they're going to flower in another month. Food to the end. One of the things I was always asking the students was, what's the survival advantage? Can we come up with 3 survival? This is in exchange for why. Why is a very hard question to answer, but this other is a little more engaging. So very interesting to look at these. You'll see these about the 3rd week of October. Another one with more fruits, and we have numerous species of these around. These are the hawthorns. They're a little bit of a nightmare to key out and figure out. But they produce a haw, which is like a little apple. They're in the rose family. And like apples, they make a little apple thing. You don't want to eat it. It's not very good. It can have short little spines, or it can have even 3.5-inch spines. What a bouquet there. It really fills up pretty nicely. So this is one of my all-time favorites, I think. The flowers, we have a lot of them, and they're pretty handy for bees early on. But later in the season, they turn bright red. I'm sure you've seen them, even in January. And so they last pretty much till the end of January. This is Ilex verticillata, or winterberry holly. This is one of my favorites. I think this fruit can be so perfect. The texture and the skin on it, it is smooth, there's rarely a blemish. It's Ilex macronata, which is our mountain holly. It's striking against the leaves, and you can see how it sits up there. And this too may get to about 9 or 10 feet. Likes wet areas, but really quite nice. And fills really a whole tree. They're beautiful, and Staminium, Vaccinium staminium, yearberry. They're in these longer racemes, and so it gets to be a nice sized shrub, and it fills in very nicely with these very kind of brilliant white bell-like flowers. And these are some of the cool bugs. Things here. This is showing all his legs, and it literally is attaching just debris on his, and I think prey. Keep going on his back, but very cool. Here's another one of the assassin bugs. You can see it has an arm here like a praying mantis, and the whole thing looks armored. This is about this big. And this is what the males seem to look like. This was out of nowhere. This is a little teeny thing too. It reminds me of those little moisture flies that are sometimes in your shower. It had the texture and shape of that, but it's the size of a housefly. And Amy got the name of that one. Almost done.
That's all.
Yay!
I am hungry. Asking what the river's needs are, and secondarily, make sure that the human needs are met to the best of our abilities. But it's not necessarily our priority. So it's a balancing act. As you see, there's our National Park Service rep making his way across a lovely bridge that's in the middle of a beaver meadow. So I love that shot. And just reminding each other on the committee that the priority for the committee is the river and being a voice for the river. It's also delightful to be that voice in the river. just gonna send you home with full bellies and that thought
And what
that if there's something that you missed that we weren't doing the last couple of years, I've really stepped back from doing events and programming because of COVID. And it's allowed me to focus on real removal projects, which has been very exciting for me personally. So I'm not sure, what the next year's work and projects will look like, but I'm certainly interested in hearing what people missed, what they'd like to see more of, what they are committed to joining me with.